An update on the Idaho College Murders. Exactly who did it? This and more on this episode of Charlie Crimebuster. Well, what some people are calling the fastest minutes in podcasting. Well, hello and welcome to another episode of Charlie Crimebuster. Well, today, man, we're going to be talking about what people all over the nation are talking about. That's those Idaho College murders. Who did it? Well, first to the podcast, if you're new, we want to thank you for joining with us. And if you're one of those who just listen every week, and boy, we appreciate you, those downloads that we're seeing now into the thousands, we appreciate it so very much. And we want to welcome you back to the podcast. You are appreciated. Hey, by the way, if you're new or you're not, if you've not yet left us a review on your podcast platform, we hope you will. Just go to your podcast platform and hit that review button, and I hope you'll give us a good one. Also, if you should have suggestions, questions, or maybe you just want to say hi, you can reach me, Charlie Crimebuster, at gmail.com. That's Charlie Crimebuster at gmail.com. And for those of you who would like to support the program, well, go on over to peacemakernetwork.com. That's peacemakernetwork.com. Hit that donate button. Become a badge supporter. For as little as $3 a month, you can help us make a difference in the life of our nation's heroes. That's law enforcement, first responders, and the military. We will leave links in our show notes for you. You know, these men and women, boy, they deserve our help today more than ever. Don't you agree? So go ahead, become a badge, B-A-D-G-E supporter. Just by even using the change you get every week, well, that'd go a long way to help these brave men and women. That's peacemakernetwork.com. All right, let's talk about a little update on the case. Kaylee Concalves, 21 years of age, her roommate and lifelong best friend, Madison Mogan, 21, and then another roommate, Xana Kernodle, 20, and Kernodle's boyfriend, Ethan Chapman, he is 22. Well, they were horribly stabbed to death in the girls' off-campus house in the early hours of November the 13th. Now, while police are being very tight-lipped about this case and really revealing very little, there are some new things that have come up since we last spoke. And something that seems to be reoccurring, things that they have to clarify. You see, the police say one thing, then they have to say another to clarify it. Well, okay, here it goes. You see, it is reported that investigators have now logged over 113 pieces of evidence, over 4,000 photos, a whole bunch of series of 3D videos taken in the house. They've also checked 3 dumpsters in the area, towed in 5 vehicles to the crime lab to go over them with more detail, and have received, now get this, over 5,000 tips. Boy, that's a lot of tips to keep up with, isn't it? And yet, still, the police are not naming any persons of interest. Now, let me point out that does not mean they're not looking at a person or persons that may become person or persons of interest. But again, they're keeping a whole lot of this close to their vest in this investigation. Now, we do have some news, though, that we picked up over the past week or so. You see, we now have reason to believe from information from Kaylee's dad, that's Kaylee. You see, Kaylee and Madison, they are roommates and they've been best friends forever. Well, according to her dad, who spoke at the memorial type service they had on campus, well, according to Kaylee's dad, Kaylee and Madison were killed in the same bed. You see, they were on the 3rd floor of the student house. And again, this is understandable. They had been best friends since childhood, and you can see by the photos they're very close to each other. So if what we have been told is true, well, there's 4 college students murdered. But get this, they were only murdered in 2 rooms. Ethan was her boyfriend, or rather, of Xana, and they were together in another bedroom that night. I say that because the coroner's report, now the coroner told us that the students were killed while sleeping in bed. And also from Kaylee's dad, well, he reported that she was one of those persons in the house that fought back because of defensive wounds. Now, I got to tell you, police really are not too happy about the information that Kaylee's dad is sharing with the media. And I guess they're going to be very careful on how much additional information they will share with him. But he's also working on his own release of information as to not to impede the investigation. Now, speaking of Kaylee, we sure are hearing a whole lot about Kaylee. She was one of the 4 students that were killed. And it appears that the internet, well, is just full of speculation. Speculation that she was the one targeted in this case. And it kind of stands out from all others. Now, this is obvious in all the reports that you read and you look at, in spite of the fact that the police are saying there is not one of the persons that they have been able to confirm as the targeted person. Now, one of the reasons I believe that it's standing out that Kaylee is the targeted person is, well, because Kaylee's dad is releasing most of the new information that the public is getting from the case. He's speaking freely on news outlets about his daughter. He was the one who actually mentioned the possibility of Kaylee having a stalker, even though, again, the police have not been able to verify as such. Now, that is not saying that it may turn out that she is the targeted one, but it is just one that we cannot confirm and that the police will not confirm at this time. Now, we got to remember, folks, there are 3 other victims. Kaylee's best friend, Madison, called Maddie by some, and then there's Xana and her boyfriend, Ethan, who were killed on the 2nd floor bedroom. And guess what? There's another parent that is speaking out that gives us additional information to update you on. You see, my friend, one of the 4 slain University of Idaho students, well, she had her father visit just a week before the murders and fix a lock in the house on the very weekend before she and her friends were brutally murdered. At least that's what her mother said in a new interview. You see, Xana Kernodle's father had visited and fixed a lock on the house during a visit the first week of November. That's what Cara Denise Northington told News Nation Friday. Now, the distraught mother wasn't sure whether the updated lock was on the Moscow home's front door or Kernodle's bedroom door. You see, each of the 6 bedrooms had its own coded lock. But it was certain that Kernodle's father, she had tinkered with one of those locks just before these terrible murders. Now, the release statement, well, about a targeted attack, it still needs clarification, according to many. You see, Chief Fry, he told ABC News on Wednesday that police believe this is a targeted attack, but he would not reveal why police think that. You see, Fry would not say if it was the person or a house that was the target. But the Moscow Police Department, it contradicted that in a statement released just hours later. You see, the statement said that the county prosecutor's office said that the suspect specifically looked at this residence and that one or more of the occupants undoubtedly were targeted. That's according to the county prosecutor's office. But then, get this, hang on to your hat now. They again identified this was miscommunications, and they came back and said again, well, detectives do not currently know if it was the residents or any occupants that was specifically targeted, but they continue to investigate. Well, unfortunately, it wasn't the first miscommunication by these local leaders. You might recall initially after the shocking murders, Well, the police believed there was no imminent threat to community. But boy, they later walked that right back, didn't they? You see, Fry did tell the ABC News Wednesday, "I own the messaging problem at the very beginning. We should have done a little better than that. We need to correct that." Well, we all know that high-profile cases, they do put a lot of pressure on officials, and I guess it's really not uncommon to see an uncoordinated response among those different agencies. But I must say, this miscommunication, well, it is harmful to the investigation. And it is creating some mistrust from the public, don't you think? Now, I would like to take a moment to say early on about that investigation. You see, I don't know how many times I've heard people say, "Oh, this is a small department. It's not accustomed to this type of crime, and they really blew it on the onset of the investigation." Well, my friend, the police did make mistakes, but they did not really blow it on the onset. You see, the agency responded when they were called. They had to clear the house to make sure there was no danger. They then verified that no one could be helped medically. You got to do that as well. But then, immediately, they shut down the scene, just like any large agency would do. And my friend, the fact that they use and are using the resources of state police and the FBI, well, that only speaks to the strength and wisdom of the department. That's not a weakness, that's a strength. Most agencies depend upon the state police and FBI for such support. Now, in fact, as much as I would like to see more information about the investigation to report on, I got to tell you, I do admire the discipline of these folks to protect the integrity of the investigation. Remember, my friend, they not only have to catch the killer, but they also must bring a successful prosecution to the monster that did this, so that that monster may never kill again. And just like it's already been said, please remember that this is not something that can be solved in 43 minutes without commercials. This is real. It's not a TV series. It's not a movie. It takes time to carefully process a scene of this magnitude. And while I have confidence in the investigation, there are some things, I got to tell you folks, I find it rather odd. Now, I want to mention those things that I find rather odd. But first, right now, well, it's time for our Crazy Crook story. We tell a Crazy Crook story each week to lighten the load. Let us all catch our breath in these dark, dark reports. This one comes from Escambia County, Florida. You see, a man broke into a Florida vacation rental. He used the bathtub, slept in the bedroom, before then enjoying a cup of coffee on the porch. That's according to the county sheriff's office. Deputies say that Zachary Murdoch, 29, he was arrested on Tuesday. And according to the sheriff's office, Murdoch broke into the glass door on the porch of the rental to get into the home. Deputies said, the man then used the bathtub, the bedroom, left a cup of coffee on the porch, and, wait for it, also left a bus ticket stub in the trash, which allowed the authorities to identify the culprit as Murdoch. Later that day, the sheriff's office, they did respond to another incident where a woman said a man tried pulling on her sliding glass door. The deputy said the woman then said the man said he was looking for Tony and left. The sheriff's office, they located our Crazy Crook Murdoch nearby and took him in custody. He faces charges of burglary and damage to property. So this guy who takes a bath, leaving his DNA all over the place, adds DNA to a coffee cup, and then, to be sure to let authorities know he's crazy, he leaves a bus ticket with his name on it for the police. This man, Zachary, is indeed Charlie Crimebuster's Crazy Crook of the Week. Now back to our main focus. You see, lots of people think it's odd how two people on the bottom floor of the house could not have heard anything from the vicious murders of 4 other people on other floors. First, you got to understand that this is student housing off campus. You see, each floor is designed to provide privacy and living spaces for the students. In fact, there was someone who was interviewed who had lived in that very house on the first floor some years before. And it was not surprising to him that no one on the bottom floor did not hear anything that night. You see, the second and the third floors are built into a hill. In fact, one picture of the residence that I studied, as you looked at it from the side, it almost looked like it was two different houses. Now, that former resident goes on to say that unless there was extremely loud music or loud TV, well, that he would not be able to hear anything from those areas. That was when he lived in the identical place in the bottom floor. In fact, the bedroom was not located above the bedroom of the bottom floor. It just was not designed that way. And you got to keep in mind, well, the killer, he used a silent weapon, a knife. No doubt he surprised the victims, could have injured them so quickly, struck them in such a way that they did not or could not scream out. Probably could not even hardly catch their breath, let alone scream. And there have been times when apartment residents have not heard crimes committed on the top floors of apartments over them, even when gunshots were fired. So I guess even though some of us do find it odd, it's probably not all that unusual. Add to that, we do not know if the people that were there may have been in a deep sleep from medication, alcohol, or drugs. Not saying they were. We do not know. Anyway, there are some people who find that odd. Another thing that I find odd is about the code lock on the bedroom door. Now, remember Mrs. Northington mentioned her daughter's bedroom and the other bedrooms had a coded lock on the doors. Of course, that was also confirmed by the previous resident we mentioned earlier. But if so, how did the killer get into the bedroom? Now, I can see how he could have gotten to the sliding glass door. It may have been unlocked, as much of the house there was used as a common area, with people coming and going. But the bedroom's door was protected by a coded lock, so again, how did the killer gain entry? I find this odd. Remember, the police are saying there was no sign force of entry and no damage. Did they take that to mean only entry to the house? What about entry into the code-locked bedroom? You see, this could be one of the reasons why the students alerted police could only mention that someone was not conscious. Maybe they could not see in the bedroom because the door was locked with a code, and only knew they could not reach that person, so they said, we think this person is unconscious. That could have very well been the reason for that type of call. I guess the answer to this odd fact is one that only the police can tell us, hopefully at some time in the future. Well, another thing I find odd, that's how quickly the police are ruling out people in suspicious circumstances. They ruled out the surviving students. They ruled out the suspicious guy at the food truck that Madison and Kaylee were seen at. They rule out the driver that drove them back to the house. They rule out the ex-boyfriend that was called numerous times that night. And they ruled out similar killings that were in the nearby bordering states. Now, I'm not saying they were wrong to rule any of these out. I just find it odd that they ruled them out so quickly. See, it's been my experience. It takes far longer time to completely investigate the comings and goings of such people. I find that odd. Do you? And it was odd that information that was released about the weapon first said it was a Rambo-style knife, when in fact it really wasn't. We know it was not a Rambo-type knife police are looking for, but it's a military knife, like a K-bar knife issued to the military. In fact, there are some who are saying this killer may have had military experience, may be a fact. But then again, these knives, well, they can be bought anywhere. I saw several for sale yesterday at a local gun show. Now, I also find it odd about the timeline, that it's not completely accurate. You see, one of the victim's sister reported that a Ring doorbell camera found her sister arriving at 1:56 a.m. instead of 1:45 a.m. that the police had reported earlier. Now, while it is clear they all were there by 2 a.m., I find it odd that the police first reported the timeline at 1:45 instead of 1:56, which was verified by camera. By the way, police did correct that. And in the timeline, we know that Xana and Ethan now, they were at a frat party earlier that evening. And we know, according to the timeline, they were home about 1:45 a.m., but we do not know if they were at the frat party the entire time. Unlike the others where they told us that they left the bar to go to a food truck, we don't have any information at all, at least I haven't seen any information at all, that they, as Xanax and her boyfriend Ethan, stayed at that frat party the whole time. Hey, we also have reports talking about that party. Well, according to sources, there was an altercation at the party. Now, we do not know if it involved the victims, but there was an altercation where the police was called. We don't know the results of the police call or even if they showed up, but we do know there was an altercation according to sources. Again, we do know that Maddie and Kaylee went to a food truck after they left the bar. We do not know that Xana and Ethan left the party, and if they did, where did they go? Why is that important? Well, it's very important. Because any person or persons they came into contact with before the murders could be possible suspects. In fact, there even could be another part of the timeline that police are not reporting that could be vital to the case. We'll get to that in just a little later in the podcast. Well, unfortunately, though, it is not odd that they don't have a suspect yet. You see, the scene is complex, to say the least, and murders are not solved so quickly. And since the police do not have a named person of interest or a suspect, let me ask you, who could have done this? Who did it? Now, without naming names, I'm going to tell you the type of murder who could have done this vicious killing. We're going to do that in a moment, but now it is time for what we like to call our Courageous Citizen of the Week story. And this comes from Chicago, a woman. She was carrying a concealed carrier, and she actually ended up shooting a gunman in the head after he tried to get into her vehicle that was on the south side of Chicago early this past Wednesday morning. That's what WFLD-TV reported. You see, the 23-year-old woman was sitting in her parked car around 2 a.m., 1300 block of East 89th Street, there in the Calmont Heights neighborhood, when four men exited a sedan, and one of them tried to get into her car while flashing a handgun. Well, that woman, she was a concealed carry person. She took her weapon, she shot the gunman once in the head. That's what police noted to WFLD. After which the gunman then ran from the vehicle. Now, one of the men he started shooting at the woman, striking her once in the arm. So paramedics, they took the gunman to the University of Chicago, where he was listed in critical condition. The woman, she was taken to Trinity Hospital, where she was listed in fair condition. Well, buddy, let me tell you, Chicago can be a very dangerous city when it comes to crime, and we read about it all the time, shootings all the time. But here is a courageous 23-year-old young lady. She's sitting in her car. Four men, not one, four men get out of a black sedan and start approaching her. One has a gun. She had taken the time to practice her weapon. She had taken the time to get a concealed weapons permit. And she was courageous enough to use it to save her own life. So this 23-year-old young lady is indeed Charlie Crimebuster's Courageous Citizen of the Week. So now let's talk about who could have done this horrible crime. Was it someone they knew? Someone who had been in the house before? What kind of a profile are we looking for? Well, the police have not released a profile, but most profilers would say that in most of these cases it would be someone with the same race. You can also say it was probably a planned, premeditated attack. I say that because most people do not walk around carrying that type of knife that was used in these murders. And most murders with this type of knife is done with a male. It appears to me that this person came with the intent to kill. So let's talk about the type of killers we can look to as possible suspects. The first one is what I call an acquaintance killer. Someone who knows and would be known by the victims. Someone who perhaps would have been rejected or put off by the victims. In fact, in most murders, investigators look for this killer in the immediate circle of the victim. In fact, this is the type of killer that the mother, one of the students, mentioned. Remember the lady, Miss Northington? She said, quote, I think they knew them. That's what she said of her daughter's killer. I think they may have been friends with them. I think it had to have been somebody close to them to have been able to get away with it like this. It just doesn't make sense. None of it makes sense. It had to be somebody they trusted. That's what the mother said. Now, police have also theorized that a stalker chasing one of the young ladies, Kaylee, may have been the culprit. But Northern, she believes the crime goes much deeper. Northerton remains confident that the 4 students were picked by the murder because of their close relationship to one another. Now, this grieving mother, she fought back tears during the 20-minute interview where she made several complaints to the police that the police were withholding information. So that is the acquaintance killer. Now, there's another type of killer that could be, and that is a random killer. Earlier I mentioned the odd thing about the timeline. Odd being that some things have been left out of the timeline. Well, here's another thing that was left out. Sources have said that Maddie and Kaylee more than likely took out her dog Murphy, a golden doodle, for his bathroom walk after they arrived at home. If so, my friend, that is important. Could someone at random have saw them and upon impulse followed them back, laid back, waited till the lights were out, waited till they were asleep, then entered the home in the back of the house at the 2nd floor, go to the 1st bedroom, and to their surprise, not find those 2 girls, but find instead Ethan and Xana, kill them and say, well, where are the girls? So they go up to the next floor, and there they find Maddie and Kaylee and kill them. Could that have happened? Well, it could have. Kind of doubtful, because that would mean the perp was walking around with a K-bar knife just in case he ran into someone. However, we really do not know, and it could be possible, could it not? Next, the killer could have been what is now called an incel killer. Kind of new, not really new, but new to a lot of people. You see, incel stands for involuntary celibate, characterized by public displays of sexual or romantic frustration. Now, these incels, they do a lot of talking online. And when they talk online, it's all characterized by hatred, self-pity, self-loathing, a sense of entitlement to sex, the endorsement of violence against women and sexually active people. Some of these people, you see, they are not attractive enough to attract people that are popular. And so they, in themselves, become incels. And they have tremendous resentment toward those that are socially attractive. Now, some of these, interesting enough, have been associated with mass murders, and they are indeed very graphic, expressing their hatred online. That is what we call an incel killer. Now, Brad Garrett, a former FBI agent, he told us that it was his guess that the attacker really wanted to kill all 4 of them. Motive unknown, relationship to victims unknown. He went on to say, why would you go to the trouble to kill 4 people? In fact, you're upset, angry, or have revenge against only one of them. You see, my friend, I do see where this type of person could generate a lot of hate and rage at these 4 successful young people who are living their best lives before others. Well, I guarantee you one thing, the police are looking at any incel groups in the area. They're looking at it carefully online as they seek their killer. Now, another killer is what is called the fantasy killer. This is one who actually gets off on the violence. Now, remember, there was no evidence of sexual assault in these killings, and so the fantasy killer would fit that description. He gets off on violent killing. The more stabs, the more he's excited. You see, that's the killer's satisfaction sexually. And this type of killer would fit the description of the killings that we know today. Now, as far as a stalker killer, well, any one of these types that I'm mentioning today would be stalking out their prey. And again, the police have not confirmed a stalker at any of the victims, but a stalker could be any one of these types. Well, here's the next one, and it's the biggie. Yep, the serial killer. Is it possible that this was the work of a serial killer? You see, while no one wants to say this out loud, it is possible that this could be a serial killer. There have been already discussions of how this killing is not unlike some of the killing of that infamous serial killer, Ted Bundy. In fact, one article put it this way: the disturbing killing of 4 University of Idaho students on November 13th bears an eerie resemblance to 2 previous college town massacres, including serial killer Ted Bundy's infamous sorority house spree over 4 decades ago. Retired criminal investigator Matt Hogan, he told Fox News that the Idaho killings were strikingly similar to the events of January the 15th, 1978, when Ted Bundy broke into the Florida State University's Chi Omega House in Tallahassee. You see, Bundy had knowledge of the victims of the house, and it was this sort of frenzied attack with extreme violence. Bundy, by the way, serial killer, is thought to have abducted and murdered over 30 women, often raping their dead bodies, fatally beat and strangled 2 of the sisters, leaving 2 others seriously injured before moving to a nearby basement apartment, and a 5th victim. They survived, but they were left with permanent deafness. If in fact this was the work of a serial killer, well, the police might need to take another look at the nearby murders in bordering states. They were done around the same time of the month. They were done with a knife, and it was similar to the crime we're reporting on. Hey, maybe this is one of the reasons why the police department very quickly clarified an earlier statement, which at first thought it was targeted with no danger to the community. You see, serial killers may have killed before and will often kill again. And get this: according to the Scientific American, there are 20 to 50 serial killers operating in the United States during any given year. 20 to 50 serial killers. And they are responsible for approximately 150 murders annually. Well, that's some food for thought. Was it an acquaintance killer? Was it an incel killer? A fantasy killer? A random killer? Or a serial killer? By the way, in just about all of those, you could say they targeted their victims or their house, couldn't you? So the mystery continues, and there is a message for all of us. We all need to realize it is our own responsibility to protect ourselves and our family. Practice situational awareness. Take that extra time to secure your residence. Good locks on doors and windows, and keep them locked. And my friend, if you do know anything about this case, please let authorities know. Who knows? The one suspicious activity you know about there in the area, well, it could be the one thing that would lead police to solve this murder and get a dangerous person or persons off the street. Call the tip line, 208-883-7180. That's 208-883-7180. Or email tipline@ci.moscow.id.us. We will, of course, leave this contact in our show notes. So, until this time, next time, this is Charlie Crimebuster saying stay safe, stay alert. For the life you save, yep, it may be your very own.